Interest Group Online. I'll say it again. Welcome, everybody. Um, this morning, we're going to have some updates. That'll be followed by the news from Ian. And then, funnily enough, Ian is also our speaker today, talking about AI, which should be fascinating as we are all grappling to get to grips with it. Then we have a chance to ask him some questions and then go into breakout rooms as normal, ready for the close of the meeting. We have one new member this month, a lady called Carol. I don't see her name on the screen just yet. Oh, she's there, Carol. A very warm welcome.
Thank you.
From Downham Market. Aha. And so we'll go into the updates. So first of all, just to let you know that Ian is doing a national talk on Monday. Ian, you're going to put a link to that into the chat, I believe.
Yeah,
Did you want to say what it's about for us?
It's about climate change and the oceans, how the oceans are helping us against climate change, but how longer term we're actually impacting the oceans, and things could change eventually. So.
Fantastic, thank you. And so I'll carry on with all of the news now, the updates. So first of all, Brenda, would you like to say a couple of words about the Edinburgh Festival?
Yes, speaking here on behalf of Terry Joyner, who's on her holidays. So Terry, who now lives in Scotland, has spoken to the organisers of the Scottish Jamboree, which, for those of you who were involved or knew about what we did in York last year, it's a very similar thing. It's a big sort of recruitment, welcome to the U3A, come along and have a try at some of the things that we do type of event, just out of Edinburgh at the end of August after the festival. And we, Climate Matters, have managed to secure a slot. I will do a climate reality presentation, and we will have a table with all of our usual papers and help sheets, things that we have. And it would be really nice to think that this could lead to rather more climate related groups in Scotland. So if any of you on there now are Scottish, this is especially aimed at you. As far as is known, only 2 groups in Scotland have a climate or environment group out of the 90 odd across the UK. So we're hoping that this will be a really big push and encourage some people to go back to their U3As and set up a group.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And I'm going to hand over to Mary now to talk about an opportunity coming up in Oxford.
Yes, I'm off. I'm unmuting myself again. Yeah, we've got a meetup coming along, and the idea is that we all go along to Oxford, and we'll go for a walk along the canal there. There's a rather nice walk with some wildlife, a little nature reserve, and there is a nice pub with food as well, which of course is all important. At some point we will get thirsty and hungry. So I don't have the date to hand, Ellie. Can you remember the date?
Oh, I will find that out and put it in the chat.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I did look at the agenda and I didn't spot my name, so apologies.
Okay, no worries at all.
It's not just as people know, it's not too far from the train station. You literally come out and just walk up to the first bridge, and the canal. You'll see all the signs just on the other side of the bridge before you go into Oxford Centre, and you basically just turn left along the canal path, and it's very pretty.
It's Thursday, the 11th of September.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you very much indeed. And Jenny, welcome. And Jenny's just going to talk about tying up the ends of summer school. Probably.
Right, I say I just had a nightmare trying to get in. I've been trying to get in for about 20 minutes. Anyway, that's another story. So when we had the first summer school in North Wales, we worked out the budget and the costs per participant, knowing that we would have to pay some of the speakers and pay their expenses as well. So when we were planning for the one this year in May for Warwick, you know, we used the same strategy. We're going to have to pay people, pay expenses, and this is what the cost per participant is going to be. Well, it worked out that none of the speakers charged as expenses, only charged as a fee. Only a few of them wanted expenses. And so at the end, we were left with a surplus. And so we decided that we would give a donation to the three main organisations that contributed. So that was the Hub at Stratford, the Mammal Society at Warwick University, and Fresk. So they were all highly delighted to get the donation from us, and that sort of like brought the finances of the thing to a nice logical conclusion. So it was good. Is that all right, Ellie?
That was wonderful, Jenny. Thank you. I don't know how we plan for another summer school financially, because it just totally depends if speakers want to be paid or not. But that's a problem for another day.
I think we have to anticipate that we will have to pay some fees and then work back. Do you want me to mention the top tip?
Oh, do. Yes, please.
Yeah. So we have been trying to get this idea of somebody in the group suggesting a top tip each month that some of us or all of us could try if we haven't already. So while this is going on, if you can maybe think of a top tip that you would like to share, and then maybe make a note so you don't forget it like I would. And then at the end, before we're wrapping up, we'll see if one or two people have got things that they would like to share with the group for us to follow through during the last few days of June and July. So your top tip from an environmental climate crisis point of view, if you've got one. Thank you.
Brilliant, Jenny. Okay. Ian, let's hand over to you in your first capacity today as sharing the news with us.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. I'll share my screen. All right, so I've got some slideshow. Yeah, just got some highlights for this month. Biodiversity loss. It's not getting any better. In the Montreal conference in 22, they agreed a framework, you know, to reduce biodiversity loss across the oceans and the land. But then most countries found out it was actually going to be quite expensive. So the response from that's been quite low. So currently there's about 1 million species in danger of extinction. And this is about 100 times the rate, you know, the normal background rate over the last millions of years. So we are producing biodiversity loss. That hasn't got any better. And secondly, a little bit of good news, clean energy investment seems to have gone up. It was $3.3 trillion last year, which is double what it was the year before. So the countries are investing in clean energy, which is good. But unfortunately, the total amount of energy used is also going up. So the amount of fossil fuels is still about the same. It's just that the extra is being absorbed by the clean energy. So it's kind of a mixed picture on clean energy. Data center emissions. Some of the big companies in the States, the data center is absolutely huge with the artificial intelligence. And their emissions have increased substantially in the last year. So there was Amazon, emissions increased by 182%, from the Microsoft 155, and so on. So some of these big data centers are emitting quite a lot, and that's something we're going to have a look at a little bit later. And that's only going to get higher going forward. global droughts, they've been measuring global droughts over the last 10 years or so. Areas hit by drought lasting 2 years grew by 75% during 2018 to 22. So we're actually seeing more droughts. This is due to it's mainly due to atmospheric evaporation from global warming, which is not surprising. And the droughts seem to become hotter and drier and more frequent over the last 40 years. So we are seeing more droughts. That's not a surprise. That's predicted effect of what we get with climate change. The equatorial areas basically start to dry out. Sahara Desert moves north, and the Arizona Desert moves north into the Midwest and so on. So that's not a surprise, but we are actually measuring the effect of it. UK solar is increasing very rapidly. That's people putting it on their roofs and these new solar farms being introduced. So that's good news. That's going ahead. It seems to be increasing every year, which is good. In fact, we are getting quite a lot of sunshine at the moment, so that's beneficial. Quite near me, Sizewell C has been given the go-ahead, which is a large nuclear power station, very similar to Hinkley. The government's putting 14.2 billion pounds into new nuclear plants, including Sizewell, and creating lots of new jobs. And so they're really ramping up nuclear. I think the idea is to get to about a quarter of our energy will be nuclear eventually, but that's going to take a long time because these projects are very long-lived. So nuclear is increasing. The main problem with nuclear is what do you do with the nuclear waste?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
got a low carbon footprint, but the nuclear waste, we have to bury it somewhere. This is a problem. Also on nuclear, small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors. Rolls-Royce has been named as the bidder for the first set of small nuclear reactors in the UK. We'll find out a bit more about this later this year. The government is putting £2.5 billion into small nuclear reactor program, which will be rolled out beginning in the 2030s. I think initially it'll be rolled out on the 8 existing nuclear sites, but then it'll obviously, I think there'll be political issues moving it next to towns and cities, but that's something for the government to resolve going into the future. So SMRs are definitely coming our way. There was a UK spending review, had some good news actually. There's a warm homes scheme was announced. The government's putting £13.2 billion into warm homes. But they haven't explained how we apply for the money yet, so we'll look forward to that. But they're hoping to upgrade about a fifth of the nation's housing stock by about 2029. So we're yet to hear the details, and that'll all be managed by GB Energy. So that was a bit of good news. UK flood defences. The UK, the strategy is going to put about £8 billion of public funding over the next 10 years into flood defences, especially as we get rising sea levels. There's a little map here. You can see the east of England, round about Lincolnshire is under threat of flooding certainly by the end of the century. We can expect massive flooding around the Lincolnshire area and up towards York and right down in certain areas. So flooding, because we're expecting about 0.5 to 1.5 meters sea level rise by the end of the century, and then it'll continue after that. So the UK is putting money into flood defences, which it absolutely needs to. That's good. We had the UN World Ocean Summit you will have heard about in Nice. They've got something called the High Seas Treaty, which is aimed at protecting the sea life, biodiversity in the sea, and also addresses issues like plastic pollution and so on. They need 60 signatures, and then they can put it into action. They've got about 50 signatures so far, 50 countries signed up to it, so we need another 10 countries or so to sign up. and then they can put together a sort of strategy. And well, there is a strategy, but put together some sort of plan to protect the oceans. So that's good news. We expect to get the rest of the signatories within the next year or so. So I think there was quite good progress on the High Seas Treaty, which is good. Drilling for gas in the North Sea. The government's kind of humming and hawing over it at the moment, should they invest or not, for explore for new gas. They've outlined what their criteria is, which is on the government website. So you have to take account of the drilling companies have to take account of the impact of the North Sea gas, as well as the cost of drilling it in their business case. So that's all to be resolved and is sort of work in progress. But it's going to make it harder to drill, but it doesn't rule it out completely. UK energy costs. Energy costs in the UK, they want to stimulate industry, so they're going to cut 7,000 businesses out of paying the additional cost for the green levies. We're now paying a green levy charge, so these businesses will be excluded, which is kind of strange, but it'll, obviously helps the businesses themselves. Bring down our energy costs are far too high. Basically, it's tied to the price of wholesale gas for some reason, which I don't quite understand. But the energy costs definitely need to come down, and the government is heading in that direction. So that's quite good news, I think. Global tree planting. There was a question: if we planted trees across the world, would that absorb all the CO2? And the answer came out: no, it wouldn't. You'd have to plant something the size of North America and Central America, completely full of trees, which is not going to happen. And in fact, it would cost, there's a cost here about trillions of dollars to do that, which is more than the valuation of the companies who are extracting oil and gas. So that's not going to happen. So global tree planting is part of the solution, but it's only ever going to be a part of the total solution. There was an airline tax study. These airlines seem to be getting tax-free. Their fuel, they seem to be escaping tax, which seems a bit crazy. The study showed that, I think this is a global figure, we could raise about 100 billion euros a year. I'm not quite sure if that's just for Europe or for the world. Anyway, it's a lot of money if we were to tax flying. Because at the moment, flying is artificially cheap. My view is that it should be taxed, and the money should go into fighting climate change. I think that's pretty obvious. Aviation is about 2% of global emissions, but it's rising gradually. As the other sectors come down, the airlines become an increasing proportion of our CO2 emissions. And they're very difficult to get rid of because sustainable aviation fuel doesn't really work the way it's meant to. And hydrogen planes are probably 20 or 30 years in the future. So that's fine. Electric planes also, certainly for short haul, electric planes are fine, but not for long haul. And finally, there was some quite good news. The CCC, Climate Change Committee, did an evaluation a week ago of the government's progress against climate change and getting to net zero by 2050. They reported that progress has been made. For example, they said that about 38% of the government projects actually look useful at reducing climate change, which leaves another 62%, which are not particularly useful. But that is an improvement on the 25% that was measured 2 years ago under the previous government. So I think the Climate Change Committee is saying, yes, there's been progress, but we need to go faster and we need to do a lot more. And they sort of highlighted one of the main problems is the cost of energy, which is far too high. I think that's it. I'll stop sharing that.
Ian, thank you very much indeed. That energy cost is so critical to this, isn't it? And getting the cost of electricity down and clean electricity. You made the comment about how our prices in the UK are, when other countries as well, are linked. I wonder if we could, in a future meeting, try and get underneath that. Because it feels like it's just a bad idea to me, but maybe there's some really important purpose.
Yeah, I've never quite understood why the energy prices, why they can't lower them down. It seems to be someone's got some vested interest somewhere, I guess. Maybe some people have got their hand up, maybe they have the answer.
They may. And if you have a speaker who might be able to put us right on this one, then put it into the chat, please. Joe.
On that topic, I wrote to my MP because that's a real pet peeve with me. And I said, the fact that you've got electricity tied to the gas prices, and it's really hindering people wanting to do heat pumps and solar and electric chargers. It's just putting an anchor around electricity, handicap. And he said, oh, the gas price dictates the electricity price in the UK because our electricity generation is largely gas. We need to break that link and can only, he's got a bit of a typo here, basically saying it can only be done when we get most of our electricity or our energy from electricity and renewables. It's very chicken and egg. I'm going to write back to him and say, that's a non-answer, really. So
I agree.
and I'm sure it's all vested interest, all the lobbying they do from the fossil fuel companies.
Thank you, Joe. David.
Yes, thanks. I just want to make a comment. The reason that electricity prices are linked to gas is purely historic. And it's because there was a time in the distant past when most electricity was generated by gas-fired power stations, which is no longer the case. But because it still is a significant part of the electricity, they're loath to change it. What I do also understand is that the present government has plans to actually reduce the price of electricity. And what's interesting to look at, if you ever look at your electricity bills and your gas bills, you'll find that your electricity prices in kilowatt hour terms are at least 3 times the price of gas, which obviously makes no sense at all. It should really be the reverse, at least parity. So there's an awful lot of work to be done on that front.
Thank you, David. Other questions to Ian on any other issue that he's raised in the news?
Yes, I've got a question. Ian,
go ahead, David.
I'm sorry to be dominating the conversation here. Ian reckoned that hydrogen-powered planes are 30 years away. Wrong. They're flying today. If you doubt this, have a look at the website of Zero Avia. They have got hydrogen electric planes flying today.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the sort of experimental. Are they commercial planes? Are they taking real passengers?
They're 18 passenger planes at the moment,
Okay.
and they're developing it and they're expanding it. And I know that the big plane manufacturers like Boeing are actually looking into this. The problem is how to store enough hydrogen on board to make it work.
Yeah, I got the impression that yes, and that's definitely encouraging. I got the impression that some of the major manufacturers were pulling out of hydrogen because of all sorts of infrastructure and where do you store the hydrogen, all those sort of issues, which is why I'm a little bit pessimistic about it. But if you're right, I'm absolutely pleased. That's fine. But I'm not actually seeing that. Anyway, let's leave it there, David.
The hydrogen debate is a very big one and important, so maybe we should get back to that as a separate subject.
I'm going to move us on now then if there's no... Oh, there is another question. Is it John or is it Ginny?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on the surprisingly optimistic report of the Climate Change Committee, which is strikingly different from the last report that they produced. And I just wondered whether Ian could briefly outline why things seem to have changed so quickly.
I think there's 2 things. One is the government has got an energy plan, the 2030 plan to get us 90%, 95% renewables by the end of the decade. So I think that got a positive mark. And some of the other actions on renewable energy, I think probably mainly. And also they're planning to upgrade the national grid. So this government has got a plan for moving forward, which the previous government hadn't got, as far as I can tell. So that's probably why. But it's still not, it's 38%, it's not 100%. So it's still got a long way to go. Yeah.
I'm going to move us on now. So, Brenda, I'm handing over to you to introduce our speaker.
Just before you do, you might have seen in the chat, I've popped a link into there, which says, why does the price of gas drive electricity prices? It's a very complicated reason, which I don't have my head round either, but it's to do with different energy types being in a sort of meritocracy of which are quoted first on all the international exchanges, with gas coming in last, and gas therefore affects electricity prices more than it should. Why that has more impact in this country as a whole, I really don't know. And I share Joe's frustration and bring this up with anyone who listen on a regular basis and don't really seem to be ever able to get a good answer. Teresa Goffey, when she was at the Department of Energy, talked a lot about decoupling gas and electricity prices, but did nothing about it. And I haven't heard anybody in the current administration even bring it up. So anyway, there's a good link there, and lots more if you want to pop it into a search engine.
I can explain.
Back as our speaker today. Thank you very much for doing that for us. We're very lucky to have you in our group, Ian. And today the focus is going to be on AI, which of course we've all known about for a long time. And it seemed like some kind of almost existential thing that was one day maybe going to affect us. And I think all of us now, this week, for me, it seems to have been on an almost daily basis. I've been in a discussion with someone, or I've used it in a different way. And I know that it is now really a big part, as big a part of my life as email is, or, any of the other tools that we use. But we also read lots and lots about its impact. And I'm going to hand over to Ian. While Ian gets ready, please can all the rest of you make sure you are on mute and that you stay on mute. And please, please, please do not write anything in the chat while Ian is speaking. There will be chance for discussion at the end. And in the chat is the question that we will all be having a look at, if that's intriguing you. Okay, then over to you, Ian.
All right, I'm just sorting out my slides. Yeah. Screen. Okay, the slideshow. So yes, there's a big emphasis on AI here. I'll talk about electrification, AI, and climate change, how they are related. The thing about climate change is renewable energy is the key. So we need to get to renewable energy as fast as possible. That hasn't changed. So that's clean energy, wind, solar, hydro, etc., etc. We're also looking for increased electrification across the sectors as an alternative to fossil fuels. So we need to get industry electrified as quickly as possible, moving away from fossil fuels. But this does mean that we'll need a lot more electricity. It's going to have to increase by at least 100% by the middle of the century. So there could be an issue there. Artificial intelligence is a way of, as Brenda said, it's getting absolutely everywhere. Within the context of energy, it can be used to make our energy systems more efficient by managing in real time multiple energy sources, so we get the best output. So AI is part of the picture as well, and one of the issues that everybody mentions is data centers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're absolutely huge. And people worry about the energy consumption. So I was going to have a look at that. Also, I want to talk about climate. AI is very good for climate modeling and doing prediction. So currently our climate models run on massive computers and the meteorological office uses them. With AI, we can actually make the whole modeling process a lot faster and a lot more accurate. So we'll be able to predict weather and climate change with a lot more accuracy and run through various what-if scenarios, to help us evaluate how we respond to climate change. So AI is part of the tool for fighting climate change. And you can see those areas highlighted in the picture there. So just looking at climate modeling and prediction, we're getting a lot of information. We got these satellites going around now. I've named a few there. Copernicus is a big European one. Sentinel, I think, is a US one. There's these satellites sucking in masses of data, measuring things like methane emissions, temperature, sea level, etc., etc. So we got huge amounts of data now on how the climate is changing, which is good. We also have a lot more land and ocean sensors, just sort of a little picture here of people setting up these sensors. So the climate is being monitored quite well, except for one or two countries that won't let us in, like probably North Korea, that sort of thing. But on the whole, we're getting a lot of information, but we can certainly see them by satellite anyway. So we know what the climate's doing. Modeling and prediction, now we've got a huge amount of data. We've got more data than we probably know what to do with. So artificial intelligence is being brought in to analyze the data. You can train up the AI systems, the patterns. You can train them on our historical weather, so they can identify weather patterns and can do predictions on what's going to happen next and how the weather's going to change over the next few days, or how the climate's going to change over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So climate modeling is part of the armory for the fight against climate change. AI is also being used for planning resource management, how we do agriculture, how our industries work, all these sort of things. AI is being used as a sort of planning tool. It's becoming increasingly powerful. So you can get answers a lot faster than by doing things manually. I just thought I'd mention we're actually monitoring global seismic activity. There's a little map here. There's about 150 seismic stations around the world. And these are all measuring seismic vibrations, whatever. So the AI has been trained up, to recognize patterns. So give us increased accuracy of predicting when volcanoes are most likely to happen, and earthquakes and major events. So yeah, it's not 100% accurate, but it's definitely improving, and it's part of the armory against seismic activity. So AI is pretty much coming into everything. The meteorological office have started using AI in the last year, to do some weather forecasting and climate prediction. I was listening to a video the other day, and 12 months ago it wasn't on the radar, but now they interviewed the director of the Met Office. He said that they're really using it, taking it very seriously. So they're introducing AI into their weather forecasting. So the Met was, it's improving weather forecasting. The AI it recognizes patterns, so it can recognize if a storm's building. If a storm's building, it can predict with a fair degree of accuracy when it's going to hit the coast, how bad it's going to be, and what the impact might be. The AI is also being used to develop high-resolution regional forecasts, so coming down to a few square miles. It's not there at the moment, but within the next 5 years or so, we'll be able to get very, very localized weather predictions. In fact, you can get them on your iPhone now. You can type in, your iPhone will find out where you are and will give you a like a rain forecast, for the next few hours, and that's all run by AI. So we're already seeing that effectively. And these climate models are being trained on all our weather records over the last 100 years, well, the last 50 years anyway, where they're electronic. So they're really these AI systems are being trained up, to do weather forecasting and recognize weather patterns and analyze weather patterns. The Met Office is partnering with various research institutions, the Alan Turing Institute, to develop the AI models. The Met Office is sponsoring some academic programs called MOPE, the Academic Partnership at various universities, to look at weather and climate. And they have a Centre of Excellence at University of Exeter, where they're putting a lot of resources, and they sponsor a professorship there, to look at climate and climate change. So Met Office is really ramping up on this, which is good. Well, in terms of the data centers, there's a question is, how much electricity are they going to take, and is it going to cause us a problem going forward? Because they're all getting massive, they're getting bigger and bigger. All the AI information is processed in these centers, which is why they're so big. An AI inquiry, for example, to a large language model is about 6 times the energy of a Google search because of the way it works. So the AI is quite energy hungry. I use large language models, the whole time, and they're very useful, but they are sucking in a lot of energy. Similarly, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, is sucking in a lot of energy, managed through data centers. Amazon's cloud computing business spent $3 billion in the UK on data centers since 2020. Google is spending millions on, there's a new data center in Hertfordshire being built. These things are springing up. The UK government announced they're going to increase investment in AI computing by about 20 times by 2030. So they're putting a lot of effort into artificial intelligence because it can reduce their administration. A lot of the admin can be done quickly, and efficiently by AI. So that, yes, there is a threat to jobs. Obviously, people who are just doing that as their full-time job will have to be retrained to do something else. But the government is investing hugely in AI. So there's a couple of questions. How much additional load is this going to put on the national grid? Is it significant? Now, NASO, the network energy operator, which is a government body, estimates that data center electricity consumption will go up about 20 times by 2050. That is a long-term forecast, so it won't be accurate to that level, but it gives you a feel for how much bigger these data centers are going to get, and they're all going to get but they're already very big. And this will add about, they're estimating between 8.9 and 11.6% increase in the total electricity demand in the UK, around about 10%, which is, I think, is doable. It's quite manageable. A 10% increase at management. The reason it's as low as that is because other sectors are also being electrified. So the data is just one of those sectors, and that's around about the 10%, level. So that's not catastrophic. I think we should be able to manage that. But it does mean that you get a concentration of energy near the data centers, and it could be that we give them some sort of independent energy source, something like possibly even a small nuclear reactor sometime in the future, just to keep them off the national grid. But anyway, that's something for the future. I'm just looking at a data center. You've got a picture, you've got a data hall of servers. You could have 100 servers, 1,000 servers, depending how big the data center is. And then the rest of it is about cooling. It's about cooling it down. because the servers will only work within a certain temperature range, so you have to keep them cool, and to extract the heat. So very large data centers are taking about 2.1 million liters of water a day to cool, which is a big number. The smaller ones about 68,000 liters, but even that's quite a lot of water to keep them cool. So the water is then pushed out into the lake or the river, wherever it is, and it just comes out a lot warmer than when it went in. It is possible to have closed loop cooling systems, but they are very expensive, so the operators tend not to use them because it's much cheaper, to just put the heat into a river or into an ocean, but closed loop systems are certainly possible. And it would require some sort of legislation, to make that happen. And as I said, possibly independent power source for data centers to keep them off the national grid might be a good idea going forward. So if you look at the overall demand forecast, this is from CCC. So you see the various sectors. Now the overall this is electricity usage. You can see that's increasing by about 100% by 2050, yeah, 100% increase. And this is spread over residential and offices, which are going to be using heat pumps, electric vehicles for transport, industry, electrification of industry, wherever possible, move away from fossil fuels. And the data centers, I mark this on separately, is about 10% on top of this lot. So it looks fairly manageable. So what we need is a plan to get to this level, which is a government planning office. So it definitely requires upgrades to national grid. The current national grid would simply fall over at those sort of levels. So, but there are plans. There's the 2030 energy plan, which includes an upgrade to the national grid, which is good. And it'll be seeing a lot of really massive pylons, about twice the size of the current ones, across the UK. So it's part of the picture, but the AI isn't a game changer in terms of energy. It just adds to it. Of course, these predictions are not accurate, and it could be higher or it could be lower going forward. So the UK Clean Power Plan for 2030 has been announced. I think it was about 6 months ago now. The idea is to get 95% of electricity generated from low carbon sources by 2030. Very ambitious. And that would leave a maximum of 5% electricity generated from gas with carbon capture and storage. So 5% of gas rather than currently it's about 35 or 40% gas. So bring that down to 5% and the rest of it from renewables. And this will all be managed by the National Energy System Operator, NESO, which is a government body. It's highly ambitious. I doubt they'll achieve that, but it's good to be ambitious, and I hope they get as near as possible. So their technology that they're going to use is just here. So they're going to spend the plan is to spend about £40 billion a year upgrading the green energy network, upgrading the energy network, effectively 40 billion a year, which is about 4 times the current level. Increasing offshore wind by a factor of 3, onshore wind by a factor of 2, 3 times solar farms in the UK, quite a lot of them in East Anglia and Lincolnshire, which is near me. They're going to upgrade about 600 miles of transmission. I would say at least 600 miles of onshore transmission with some very, very large pylons. Increased battery storage. Battery storage is only used for emergencies. Currently, we've got about a couple of hours of battery storage backing up the grid, for major outages. So they're going to increase that by at least a factor of 4, to make the network more resilient. Plans for hydrogen, especially good for energy storage, I would say. And say it's a hydrogen planes, that'd be great. and to store energy. So I think that's a good use of hydrogen. Location pricing is a political issue. We may or may not see it. It may be you get cheaper power if you're near a pylon, but that's yet to come out of the politics. So that's the broad plan for what they're going to do. I think it's very ambitious. So just to recap, to get to net zero by 2050, we've got to bring emissions down around about 4% a year. You know, we've got 25 years, around about 4% a year, which is going to be hard. We have the technology. We need more behavioral change, and we need more political leadership. I think political leadership has improved, but it's still got a long way to go. So we need to work harder at this to get to net zero. But looking globally, I mean, the UK is doing quite well. We've got down to 40% less emissions than we had in 1990. So we're going in the right direction. But globally, emissions are still rising. There's countries like the US have started going up again. Russia and India, it's always been going up. So if you look at the global output, this is a prediction from the Climate Action Tracker that I pulled off. This is the most recent one I've managed to pull off. It's predicting we get to 2.5 to 2.9 degrees by the end of the century of warming. If countries stuck to their pledges and targets, it would come to about 2.6, but of course they never do. So it's heading up towards 3 degrees. So we're looking towards 3 degrees warming by the end of this, well, certainly after the end of the century at the moment, unless something changes. So that puts it in some perspective. I think the artificial intelligence is part of the battle against this, but we do need countries. Really, it comes down to politics. Is the key driver here. So, in summary, the AI data center consumption will grow about 20 times by 2050, predicted by NESO, which sounds about right to me. It'll then consume about 10% of electricity, predicted by NESO. The government is investing very heavily in AI. These data centers will be set up, to drive government services, which will increase the efficiency of governments, make it much more efficient, which is good. And AI is expected to increase efficiency across all the sectors, the energy sector, transport, industry. Probably the sectors lagging behind would be agriculture and buildings, I think heat pumps. Certainly agriculture is probably the one that's lagging a little bit on this one. And the government has produced its 2030 clean power plan, which looks good. They're very ambitious. And if they can do it, that'll be fantastic. It will certainly be helpful. Because if you're producing clean energy, it cleans up the other sectors, because the other sectors are using that energy. So if you clean up the energy sector, you basically clean up all the sectors. And the transition to renewables at 4% a year to net zero is pretty challenging. Okay, I'll stop sharing there.
Thank you so much, Ian. Wow, what a lot of information. So we've got a good amount of time now to go into breakout groups. The discussion point is in the chat. Just pop it back in there for you. How will AI help fight climate change? Jenny, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, if I'd just like to ask you a quick question, if that's possible. With AI being trained to predict patterns and using all the historical information, I'm not quite sure why that is useful when climate is changing. If we're getting hotter and drier and more storms, how can using climate patterns from 50 years ago be helpful?
Yeah. It's basically recognizing, the underlying drivers for climate, which is present in the patterns, so the patterns just get larger and more frequent, but it's still the same patterns. So it is valuable in that sense for making predictions. It's I would say it's an ongoing area of research. The Met Office is sponsoring a lot of work on this. It's looking very promising, but yeah, it's the underlying patterns that they've been able to identify.
Thank you for your question, David. You need to unmute, David.
Yeah, just first of all, thanks, Ian, for his usual very illuminating presentation. One of the things that I would like to raise about this is the whole discussion is on the basis really focused around electricity. And at the moment, electricity is only around 20% of our total energy consumption. The rest of it is fossil fuels, which are mainly imported, oil, such as that. And there seems to be very little discussion on how we're going to turn that over to clean energy from what it is. So that's my point, really.
Yeah, the clean energy plan that they come up with will be 95% clean energy by 2030. That is a government policy. So that should address that issue and cut down the amount of fossil fuels.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Janet Palmer.
Hello, Ian. Thanks for that, because I didn't really understand much about AI at the beginning of that talk, and I feel I've made a little step forward, especially in how it can be used for good. But I'm just going to ask about this thought that AI is only as good as the information it's using and the training data that it has. So is there a distinction between AI that's using real world data like the weather and that is actually other sorts of data that may be wrong? So it's sort of garbage in, garbage out, and people may start relying on AI that actually is telling us the wrong thing. So are there two sorts of AI in that way?
I think depends which IT supplier you're using as to what limitations they put on their AI. I mean, some of them limit more than others. Mostly it's unrestricted. So it will produce garbage about 1 or 2% of the time. Say on a search, you'll get rubbish. I found that very occasionally it just comes out with complete rubbish, but mostly it's very, very good. It's certainly as good as any human that you talk to. It is getting better. There is rubbish in there. I think the regulators are trying very hard to get the IT companies, to roll this in and put in more restrictions and boundaries on the AI. And I think they're gradually doing that. But their main aim is to make money. So that's probably secondary. So they really need to be forced to do it. But yeah, it will get better. Yes, and I agree there is rubbish on there. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Linda Catley.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, you were talking about the water used to cool the data centers. So presumably there's a lot of hot water coming out. Is there a way of capturing that and putting it to good use for heating?
In theory, yes. In fact, there have been schemes in the past where they've used local, you heat up a town locally using the excess, for example, nuclear. But it's not going to happen very much because the economics is not particularly good. It's quite expensive to set these things up. That there's a lot of upfront investments. I think if the governments or the local governments, if it had any money, so probably the central government could actually pay for the infrastructure, and then the energy could be used, and that will be a big saving. But setting it up is, expensive. So yeah. So in theory, yes. In practice, probably not.
Wouldn't it be nice if it could be made a condition of building a data center that you do some social good with it?
These IT companies got loads of money, so yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to stop. It's not going to stop them doing it. They'll still do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your question as well. Christine Thompson. Just make sure you're unmuted there, Christine.
I'm unmuted. Why are we assuming these companies behind AI can be trusted? I mean, this is the thing we took with Wi-Fi. You know, we listened to the people who said it was going to be a force for good and so on. And we've now got all the things that we've got, like teenagers being driven to suicide by what they find on the web and so on. I can see that AI has some advantages, but I think we are being much, much too optimistic and naive about its dangers. And we're falling into the same problem of assuming that everything has to be judged by economic criteria. So I just throw that out as an idea.
Yes, I know. I think you're absolutely right. I think the ethics of AI is something which is under discussion. And there are a lot of issues, especially around privacy. The privacy on the AI systems is pretty minimal. It can quite easily be hacked into, so that needs to be improved. You know, the IT companies need to improve the privacy, and the ethics. Obviously, you know, getting misinformation. You know, things like suicide groups, that sort of thing. I think it's a mixture of good and bad. It's with us. It's not going to go away. All we can do is make. There's actually huge benefits in health, in healthcare. You know, things like routine screening and so on. But again, private, you know, from your phone or from your device locally. But again, the privacy of information, I think, is a big issue, which hasn't really been sorted out. And obviously, you know, there's bad things about AI as well. And you'd always get a mixture of good and bad, you know, any new technology. But I think the message is, you know, we have to regulate it. And the governments, they're years behind the IT companies. They're 4 or 5 years behind. The European Union is trying to regulate things like facial recognition. You're not allowed to just spy on people. They've got that legislation in the EU. In the UK, it's less clear because our regulators are not as good as the EU regulators. And in the US, it's almost non-existent. So yeah, there's a lot of catching up to do. I think it's a mixture of good and bad. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to take 2 more questions that have their hands raised right now, and then we'll go into breakout groups because I know quite a few of you appreciate those smaller group discussions. So firstly to Anne McGarry.
Ian, am I right in thinking that putting all that heated up water into the environment, rivers, etc., is going to have a negative impact on, well, an impact on habitats in that area?
Yes, it will locally. It'll make a difference. Yeah. I mean, I know in Sizewell Sea we're pumping out. In Sizewell we're pumping out warm water into the North Sea the whole time, and the local fish has changed. The mix of fish locally has changed. Some of them are healthier and some of them are less. Yeah, I mean, the answer will make a difference. Yeah. And you know, the environmentalists are well onto that. So I think the companies have to listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. And that's where we used to be with coal-fired power stations, isn't it? Downstream, very altered environments and often quite bleak environments for things to live in. Okay, last question before we go into groups. Laurie? Just make sure you're unmuted there, Laurie.
Yes, thanks. Just on that last point, there is very tight regulation and monitoring of the discharge temperatures from any form of power station. That's why we had cooling towers for many years, and they're coming down. I wanted to ask Ian whether, an excellent talk, by the way, thank you very much indeed, whether he's aware of the work being done by small companies like HEATR, HEAT. I'll put a link in the chat. But there, a friend of mine has a server bolted to his hot water tank, which is doing a high intensity active computing, and the heat generated from the server is transferred to the hot water tank, and then is providing him with, you have to have a fast broadband connection. That's the main requirement. But distributed computing is a bit like the power station problem. You know, we built central power stations. We're building big central data centers near to where the demand is. But actually, if we decentralized the server population, then we'd be able to utilize that heat more effectively. Much easier to transfer data and electricity over cables and heat over pipes.
So I think that's an area that needs much, much more support.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think I've heard that on one Radio 4 program recently. Yeah, and I
The only
think that,
problem, I mean, I would have one here, but I don't have an expansion tank in my roof. And the thermal aspects of the heating equation are different to the way the expansion tank works. And so that's what's limiting me at the moment. But as soon as I can, I would be joining the trial. I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some really, really good questions and thoughts leaping out here, which is one of the great things that sometimes happens. Ellie, we'll pop people into groups in a moment, or you will, the royal we. How will
okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. It'll be 4 or 5 participants in a room, and I'll give about 15 minutes.
Good. Okay. And when you come back into the main group, you can pop your thoughts, questions, and ideas into the chat, and there'll be 5 or so minutes there for Ian to take a few more questions when we come back. So off we go. Thank you.
Shall I start off with a couple of comments from my group, Ellie, while we're waiting for people to put stuff in the chat?
Lovely, Jen.
If that's okay. Ian, first of all, I was a bit worried about the word fight. How will AI help fight climate change? And, we decided we preferred predict, because AI can't fight it, can it? I know it's just a semantics thing. But we spent quite a bit of time talking about the ethics of all this, and misinformation and disinformation, and people feeling quite threatened, because in my group none of us really knew anything much about this. We were just letting our future be ruled by the hands of super brains. Felt quite scared about the future. You're muted, Ian.
Yeah, yes, the AI is, I think we can see benefits in the short and medium term. In the longer term is sort of pretty unpredictable. It could go in various directions longer term. There's various academics putting out horror stories for long term, and some think that's rubbish. So it's quite uncertain. But certainly there's big benefits short and medium term, pretty much across the sectors. AI, I was thinking it improves the efficiency of our industries, which means you get less emissions. That's what I meant by fight. I mean, it kind of not just the AI itself, but you're working with humanity. Yeah. And AI is coming into education as well. We have more sort of personalized education using AI systems.
More students cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's happening already with large language models, because they're so good. I think they can spot what they've never used semicolons before, and that sounds a bit odd.
Yeah, we've got one group's put in the chat talking about local networks and the role they might play in massive power cuts.
Yeah, they had those big power cuts in Spain, didn't they? And in fact, it was across Europe, in France, Spain, and Portugal. And they're still working out, but they think it was a synchronization problem. Basically, the control and management of the European power network had become quite fragmented, and they've joined lots of bits together, and there's lots of automatic responses. But what they hadn't got was a model of the complete system. So they met some conditions, and suddenly things started switching off automatically, because they didn't really set the system up to avoid it. Seems to be the consensus. So you've really got to understand what it is we're doing here.
Yeah. I don't know, seem to be a bit of almost blasé belief that we can create all these new jobs, 60,000 new jobs or whatever, all these big numbers are quoted, but who's going to do, have we got people clever enough to do those? And the people that we're making unemployed aren't going to be transferable to those new jobs, are they?
No, I think that's a danger, that the people at the lower levels who are doing routine jobs, a lot of those are going to disappear. Possibly most of them will disappear eventually. So they're going to have to do something else. One thing AI is good is, for enterprising people, AI can help you set up a new business a lot faster than you could do yourself. So there are opportunities for reasonably clever and ambitious people. But I agree with you that it's the others that are going to suffer. But we have to see what happens. Certainly.
There's a comment in the chat about AI predicting things, and then presumably AI will then be able to suggest various options to deal with the problem. So then do we come back to ethics, or have we got skilled civil servants and politicians?
Probably not. They need educating. Everyone needs educating about AI because it's moving a lot faster than we think. It's all about education. I think that's why these presentations are useful. It gives everyone some level of knowledge. But civil service, I think the civil service is running AI courses within the civil service. I did get visibility a month or so ago of a whole bunch of courses that they're offering their employees. So I don't think they're doing it because the government has got a strategy for introducing AI. And as part of that strategy, they've got to look after the people, the civil servants. So they do have a re-education program. But it's up to the individual how well they do on those education programs. So,
do we see what Margaret's question is? Margaret Nichols?
Sorry, I can't use the chat box. In our group, we came up with a few things that are relevant, like educating the masses. And the way you'll do that is by using soaps rather than leaflets, but also educating civil servants. They might be highly educated in the conventional way, but they're not in the real world. And until they know what it's like, there may not be as much progress as we want. And I speak from experience when I say that. And the other three in the group, I think I'm safe in saying, agreed with what I said. But educating the masses on climate issues is the only way forward. And I've used it before, and a gentleman used it as well. The Archers was the first educational soap, shall we say, just after the war, and it worked. Let's start using Coronation Street or whatever, and that will educate far more people.
I think that's a good idea, Margaret. Yeah, we should. Yeah, education, I think, has got to be the answer because there's opportunities with AI as well as the negatives.
The average person out there doesn't know what AI is, Ian. We're talking at a level that I don't know how much we are in the minority. That sounds horribly superior, but I think we know what we mean. The average person out there probably doesn't know and probably doesn't care. And therefore, they're not going to listen to it or not listen to anything. And that's what we've got to do. We've had this discussion at AR meetings, Ian. We've got to educate the masses. And until we do that, very little will improve.
I'm going to just butt in now because we're approaching time. If you have thought of a top tip and would like to be specially selected for today's top tip, would you please raise your electronic hand? That was a really interesting session. I hope everybody has found something of interest to them. If you want to save the chat to catch all of those great links and comments, now is a really good time to do it. I see one hand raised. David Dundas.
Yes, thanks. I think the issue that we need to be looking at, and particularly this group, is the overall amount of energy that the country uses and how much of that is renewable energy and to look to see what we're going to do to replace all the rest, which is about 95% of fossil fuels in the next 25 years. And the way I see it is that a very, very high proportion of our energy comes from the import of oil from the Middle East and Africa. And how are we going to replace that with fossil-free energy?
So, David, what's your top tip for me this week?
What you should be doing is study the problem.
I'll take one more. Linda Creed. You're on mute, Linda.
I realised that the minute I launched, I thought I'm on mute. Okay. Next month, July, is Plastic Free July. I suggest we all go onto the website, which is Plastic Free July, and see what we can do.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah, definitely.
Our meeting next month is going to be very much in the ethos of U3A, because it's going to be by members for members, just as today's has been. We're going to have a few speakers. Oh, Brenda would like to say
I was just
something.
who I think the people are who've come forward to speak. We will not be able to choose, but I'm just really anxious I haven't left anybody out. On my list, I have Heather, Helen, Ellie, Janet, Linda, and Christine. If anybody out there is thinking, she's forgotten me, please drop me an email and let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. So it'll be a variety of stimulus, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms and be able to discuss what we've heard. That meeting will be on Friday, the 25th of July, 10 o'clock usual time, last Friday of the month, as always. That brings us to the end of our meeting. So if we could stop the recording now, and core group, if you